The blade was blessed by the high priest. They called it the mercy. King Marcus Hale stood over his son's bed, silver dagger trembling in his hand. Below him, a small wolf pup wheezed in shallow, dying breaths. 2 years of watching his bloodline wither. 2 years of shame. End his suffering, the physicians whispered. Marcus raised the blade. Then a hand scarred, common, fearless caught his wrist. Clara Whitfield, a disgraced healer in a stained apron, looked the Lycan king in the eyes and whispered, "Your Majesty, that's not sickness." She pulled back the pup's matted fur. Violet light exploded across the room. Burned into the child's flesh was a mark Marcus hadn't seen since the war. The enemy's brand. A siphon curse. His son wasn't dying. He was being murdered. And the killer was standing right behind them. Welcome back if you crave fated mates, redemptive obsession, and a love fierce enough to burn down empires. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new here, because this story is only beginning. The gates of Iron Ridge Castle didn't welcome visitors. They threatened them. Black iron fangs rose 30 feet high, twisted into the shapes of wolves mid-lunge, jaws open, ready to snap shut on anyone foolish enough to enter. Beyond them, the castle itself loomed like a mountain of stone and shadow, its towers clawing at storm clouds that never seemed to leave. Clara Whitfield stood at the servants' entrance, her thin cloak doing nothing against the wind that howled through the mountain pass. Her fingers were numb. Her boots had holes. The letter in her pocket, accepted for nursery position, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She needed this job. Her father was dead. Her family name was Poison. The Whitfield line, once revered as the high healers of the North, had been exiled 3 years ago for unsanctioned magical practices. Translation: her father had healed a rogue wolf without the king's permission, and the punishment was absolute. Now Clara had nothing. No home, no coin, no future. Just this. One last chance to survive. The door opened before she could knock. A woman stood there, tall and sharp as a blade. Madame Thorne, head of household staff, looked like she'd been carved from the same stone as the castle. Her eyes were gray and cold, her mouth a thin, unforgiving line. "You're late," Madame Thorne said. Clara blinked. I arrived at the time stated in the... The time stated was the latest acceptable arrival. Early is on time. On time is late. Madame Thorne stepped aside. Inside. Quickly. We don't heat the corridors for stragglers. Clara hurried in, and the door slammed shut behind her like a prison gate. The kitchen was massive, stone ovens, copper pots, strings of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, but it was the silence that unnerved her. A dozen servants moved through the space, chopping, stirring, kneading, and not one of them spoke. Not one of them looked up. "You're the Whitfield girl." It wasn't a question. Madame Thorne circled Clara like a wolf assessing prey. "Your father was executed for treason against the crown. Your mother drank herself to death in shame. And you," she stopped directly in front of Clara. "You think you belong here?" Clara kept her eyes down. "I need to work, madame. What you need is irrelevant. What you can provide is all that matters." Madame Thorne produced a heavy iron key from her belt. "You've been assigned to the North Tower, the nursery." A pot clattered in the corner. One of the kitchen maids gasped, then quickly covered her mouth. Clara's stomach dropped. The prince's nursery? 4 maids in 6 weeks, Madame Thorne said flatly. All quit. One was bitten so badly she needed stitches. Another said the room was cursed and fled in the night. The last one simply never returned for her second shift. She leaned in close. "The prince is difficult, Miss Whitfield. He is violent. He does not eat. He does not shift. And the king has made it clear. Minimal contact, minimal resources. We are not to coddle him, but if he's sick, he is weak." The word came out like venom. And weakness, in the Iron Ridge line, is unforgivable. You will clean his quarters. You will leave food and water. You will not use any healing magic, as it has been forbidden within these walls by royal decree. You will not attempt to fix him. Do you understand? Clara's throat tightened. "I understand. Good. Lady Seraphine, the king's chosen Luna-elect, demands absolute silence during her meditation hours. If you disturb her, you will be dismissed immediately. She has influence over His Majesty's decisions." Madame Thorne's expression was unreadable, but something bitter flickered in her eyes. The king himself has issued a standing order regarding the prince. Let him grow strong or let him fade. Interference is considered disobedience. She turned and walked toward the corridor, gesturing for Clara to follow. One more thing, Miss Whitfield. The pup's name is Tobias, though no one in the castle has spoken about it in months. They climbed and climbed. The north tower was the farthest point from the great hall, from the kitchens, from anywhere warm or alive. The stone stairs spiraled upward, lit only by torches that flickered in the drafts. Clara's legs burned. Her breath came in short gasps. "Why is he so far from everyone?" Clara asked, immediately regretting it. Madame Thorne didn't turn around, because the king cannot bear to hear him scream. The words hung in the cold air like a curse. Finally, they reached a landing. A single door stood at the end of a short hallway, heavy oak reinforced with iron bands. There were scratches near the bottom, deep gouges, as if something had tried to claw its way out. Madame Thorne unlocked the door, and the smell hit Clara like a slap. It wasn't just filth. It was rot. Old blood, unwashed fur, infection, fear it all, mixed into a stench so thick, Clara had to cover her mouth to keep from gagging. But underneath it all was something else. Something that made her healer instincts scream. Burnt sugar, copper, magic gone wrong. Clean the mess, change the bedding. Do not touch him unless absolutely necessary. Madame Thorne handed Clara the key. The door locks from the outside. If he becomes aggressive, leave immediately and bar the door. Do you understand? Yes, madame. Good luck, Miss Whitfield. You'll need it. And then she was gone, her footsteps echoing down the stairs, leaving Clara alone in the doorway of the cursed nursery. Clara stepped inside. The room was large, far too large for a child. High ceilings, stone walls, a fireplace that hadn't been lit in weeks. Heavy curtains were drawn over the windows, blocking out every trace of sunlight. The only light came from a single guttering candle on a table near the door, and in the corner, half buried in a nest of shredded blankets, torn straw, and shadows, was a shape. Small, trembling, alive. Clara's breath caught. Prince Tobias. The heir to the Iron Ridge throne was in his wolf form, a young pup, no larger than a shepherd dog, but he looked nothing like the proud silver Lycans Clara had seen in paintings. His fur was matted, filthy, dull, gray, instead of the legendary hail silver. His ribs pressed sharply through his sides, each breath shallow and labored. His legs were too thin, his paws too large for his wasted body. He looked like he was starving, like he'd been starving for years. Clara took one step forward. The pup's head snapped toward her, and he snarled. But it wasn't the snarl of a predator. It was the sound of something broken, something that had been hurt so many times, it no longer knew the difference between a hand reaching out to help and a fist coming down to strike. "Shh," Clara whispered, instinctively softening her scent the way her father had taught her. "I'm not going to hurt you, little one." Tobias bared his teeth small, milk-white fangs slick with saliva. His eyes were wild, pupils blown so wide the gold of his irises was nearly swallowed by black. He tried to back away, but his hind legs gave out, and he slammed into the wall with a sickening thud. The scream that came out of him was human, high-pitched, agonized, the sound of a child in pain beyond imagining. Clara froze, her heart hammering. That wasn't normal. That was... She looked closer. Tobias wasn't moving like a normal wolf. His right shoulder was held stiff, locked at an unnatural angle. Every time he tried to shift his weight, a tremor ran through his entire body, and his breathing hitched in sharp, broken gasps. Something was wrong. Horribly, deeply wrong. Clara set down the bucket and cleaning rags she'd been given. She moved slowly, carefully, to the far side of the room. She didn't approach him. She just started working. She scrubbed the floor in silence, changed the fouled straw bedding, refilled the water bowl that hadn't been touched, set out a plate of roasted venison and fresh bread. All the while, she watched him. Tobias didn't move. He just stared at her with those haunted golden eyes, panting, waiting for the pain he knew was coming. By the time the sun began to set, what little light filtered through the heavy curtains, the room was clean. But the pup still hadn't eaten, still hadn't moved. Clara knew the rules. Do not touch him. But the healer in her, the gift her father had died protecting, was howling. "He's in agony, Clara. You have to help him." She filled a basin with warm water, grabbed a soft cloth, and slowly, inch by inch, approached the nest. "I know you're hurting," Clara whispered, crouching low, making herself small. "But you can't stay like this, Tobias. The dirt and infection, they'll make it worse." The pup watched her. He growled again, but it was weaker this time. He was exhausted. Clara moved closer. 6 feet, 4 feet, 2. When she finally reached out, Tobias flinched so violently he nearly toppled over. But Clara was fast. She placed one gentle hand on his front paw before he could retreat. He froze. His entire body locked, every muscle tensed, waiting for the blow that always came. But it didn't. Clara didn't strike, didn't pull, didn't hurt. She just held his paw, her thumb gently stroking the matted fur. "That's it," she cooed softly. "Good boy. You're such a good boy." Tobias let out a breath, shaky, broken, hopeful. And then, for the first time in what must have been months, he leaned into her touch. Clara's eyes stung. She blinked back tears and began to gently wipe the grime from his muzzle. He let her. He was so tired of fighting. She moved the cloth down his neck, carefully cleaning the matted fur behind his ears. She saw him clearly now, the strong line of his father's jaw, the elegant bone structure of his late mother, the intelligence burning behind the pain in his eyes. He was beautiful. Clara worked her way down to his shoulders, her movements slow and deliberate, and then her fingers brushed against something beneath the fur. Something hard, something that burned. Tobias shrieked. It was a sound Clara would hear in her nightmares. A sound no child, wolf, or human should ever make. Pure, animalistic agony. He lunged. His jaws clamped down on Clara's wrist, teeth sinking into flesh, and Clara gasped, but she didn't pull away. She didn't strike him. She endured. Because the bite was weak, because his strength was gone, because she could feel it now, the wrongness radiating from that spot on his shoulder like a wound in reality itself. "Let go, sweet boy," Clara whispered through gritted teeth, her voice shaking. "Please, let go. I'm trying to help you." Tobias released her, panting, his eyes wide with terror. Blood dripped from Clara's wrist onto the stone floor, but Clara barely noticed, because when her fingers had touched that spot just for a heartbeat, she'd seen it. A light, violet, pulsing. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. A lesson from years ago. "Clara, if you ever see a siphon brand on living flesh, you run. Those marks are placed by blood mages and enemy kingdoms. They drain life itself. And they are never ever accidental." Clara's hands trembled as she dipped the cloth into the water again. She had to see it. She had to be sure. "Tobias," she said softly, her voice steady despite the terror clawing up her spine. "I need you to trust me. Just one more time. Please." The pup whimpered, but he didn't move. Clara reached out and gently, carefully, parted the thick fur on his right shoulder blade. The moment her fingers touched his skin, the water in her cloth hissed and turned black. And there, burned into the flesh of the crown prince of Iron Ridge, glowing with a malevolent violet light that pulsed in rhythm with his fading heartbeat, was the sovereign brand of the Shadow Pack. Clara's vision swam. Her stomach dropped into freefall. The mark. The ancient enemy. The sigil that turned living beings into batteries, slowly draining their alpha essence to empower another kingdom's rise. This wasn't a genetic defect. This was treason. Someone in this castle, someone close to the king, had branded the heir, had been siphoning his life force since the day he was born, feeding it across the border to Iron Ridge's greatest enemy. And King Marcus, blinded by grief and pride, had never seen it. Clara looked into Tobias's exhausted eyes, and she understood. He wasn't weak. He was the strongest creature she'd ever met. Because he'd been fighting this curse alone, every single second of his short life, and he was still breathing, still alive. The door creaked open behind her. Clara's blood turned to ice. She spun, heart in her throat, and saw a figure silhouetted in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the crimson cloak of the king's elite guard. Captain Vane. His face was handsome, sculpted, the kind of face people trusted. But his eyes were cold, empty, Madame Thorne mentioned we had a new maid, he said smoothly, stepping inside and closing the door behind him with a soft click. I wanted to ensure you understood the delicate nature of the prince's condition. Clara rose slowly, positioning herself between Vane and the pup. I understand he's in pain. Pain is necessary for growth. Vane's smile didn't reach his eyes. The king has made his wishes very clear. The boy must be left to either thrive or fade. Any interference would be unwise. Clara's pulse hammered in her ears. And if there's another reason he's suffering, something that isn't natural? For just a moment, a fraction of a heartbeat, Vane's mask slipped. His eyes went dark. His smile sharpened into something predatory. Then I suppose, he said quietly, his voice like silk over a blade. That would be a problem. For anyone who discovered it. He let the words hang in the air. Then he turned and walked out, the door locking behind him with a final, ominous click. Clara stood frozen, blood dripping from her wrist, the violet glow of the brand still flickering in the corner of her vision. She looked down at Tobias, this tiny, broken, brave creature, and made a choice. She was going to save him, even if it meant defying a king, even if it meant facing down a traitor with a blade, even if it meant watching the entire kingdom burn. Because Clara Whitfield, daughter of an executed healer, had just uncovered the highest treason Iron Ridge had ever known, and she wasn't going to let them kill this child to hide it, not while she still had breath in her lungs. Clara didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that violet glow pulsing beneath Tobias's fur, heard his screams echoing through the stone tower, felt Captain Vane's cold stare burning into her back. She returned to the nursery before dawn, her wrist bandaged, her hands shaking. The key felt like a lead weight in her pocket. When she opened the door, Tobias was exactly where she'd left him, curled in his nest of blankets, breathing in shallow, painful gasps. But this time, when Clara entered, he didn't growl. He just watched her with those enormous golden eyes, and something in them looked almost like recognition, almost like hope. Clara knelt beside the nest, her voice soft as morning mist. I'm going to help you, Tobias. I promise. But first, I need to see it again. I need to understand what they've done to you. She filled the basin with fresh water, added a handful of crushed silverleaf, an herb her father had used to reveal hidden magic, and soaked a clean cloth. Her hands trembled as she wrung it out. The water was crystal clear, reflecting the candlelight like liquid glass. Tobias flinched when she reached for him. But he didn't bite this time. He was learning. Or maybe he was just too tired to fight anymore. Clara pressed the cloth gently against his right shoulder, exactly where she'd touched before, and began to wash away the layers of grime and matted fur. The pup whimpered, his whole body tensing. But Clara whispered soothing words her father had taught her old healer's prayers that had been passed down through generations. The moment the silverleaf water touched his skin, everything changed. The water turned black. Not gray, not dirty. Black as ink, as midnight, as the void between stars. It hissed and steamed against his flesh, and the stench of burnt sugar exploded through the room, so thick Clara had to fight not to gag. And then the light bloomed. Violet, pulsing, alive. The brand revealed itself in its full horror, a complex sigil burned into Tobias's shoulder blade, intricate lines and symbols that formed the ancient mark of the Shadow Pack. But it wasn't just a scar. It was moving, writhing. The violet light pulsed in rhythm with Tobias's heartbeat, and with each pulse, Clara could see threads of golden light, alpha essence being pulled from the pup's body, drawn into the brand like water spiraling down a drain. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her father's books had described this, but she'd never believed she'd see it with her own eyes. A siphon brand. A living curse. Tobias wasn't sick. He wasn't weak. He was being drained. Every second of every day since the brand had been placed, his life force was being stolen, fed across miles of wilderness to empower someone else. Some enemy alpha, growing stronger while Iron Ridge's air withered away. The pup had been fighting this curse since birth. Fighting to breathe, to move, to simply exist, while an invisible hand reached inside him and pulled out everything that made him strong. And everyone, the king, the physicians, the entire castle, had looked at this suffering child and called him a failure. Clara's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed, her hands clenched into fists. This was murder. Slow, Calculated, deliberate murder, dressed up as genetic weakness. Tobias let out a soft whine, and Clara looked down to see him watching her, his expression so human it broke her heart. He'd been alone in this pain for so long. No one had believed him. No one had helped him. Until now. Clara gently dried his fur and pulled him close, feeling his rapid heartbeat against her chest. "I see you now," she whispered fiercely. "I see what they've done. And I swear on my father's grave, I'm going to stop it." But even as she spoke the words, Clara knew the terrible truth. Removing a siphon brand required high healer magic, the very magic that had gotten her family exiled, the very magic that was now forbidden in Iron Ridge under penalty of death. If she tried to save Tobias, she'd be signing her own execution warrant. And if she didn't, she'd be watching a child die when she had the power to save him. Outside the tower window, the first rays of dawn broke across the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere in the castle below, Captain Vane was waking up, checking to make sure his secret was still safe. Clara held Tobias tighter and made her choice. She would save him, no matter the cost, because some things were worth dying for. Clara waited until the castle stirred to life, until the king would be in the great hall for his morning council. She left Tobias sleeping finally, mercifully sleeping, and tucked the silver leaf-stained cloth into her apron as evidence. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she descended the tower stairs, rehearsing the words she'd say. "Your Majesty, your son isn't weak. He's been branded. He's being drained by the Shadow Pack. Someone close to you is a traitor." The corridors were crowded with servants preparing for the day, nobles drifting toward breakfast, guards changing shifts. Clara kept her head down, her pace steady, even as panic clawed at her throat. She had to reach the king before Vane realized what she'd discovered. She was 3 hallways from the great hall when a hand shot out and yanked her into a side alcove. Clara gasped, stumbling backward, and found herself pressed against cold stone, staring up into Captain Vane's handsome face. His smile was pleasant, his voice warm, but his grip on her arm was iron. "Miss Whitfield, you're moving rather quickly this morning. Almost like you're running toward something important." Clara's mouth went dry. I need to speak with the king. About Prince Tobias." "Do you?" Vane's head tilted, his expression curious, like a cat studying a mouse. "And what, precisely, would you tell His Majesty about the prince? That he's dirty? That he cries?" "We already know these things, Clara." The way he said her name, intimate, possessive, made her skin crawl. "I found something," Clara said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "On his shoulder. A mark. A brand." Vane's smile never wavered, but something dark flickered in his eyes. "Did you? How unfortunate." He stepped closer, backing her further into the alcove, out of sight from the main corridor. His hand moved from her arm to the wall beside her head, caging her in. When he spoke again, his voice was soft as silk, deadly as poison. "Let me tell you a story, Clara. 3 years ago, I placed that brand on the newborn prince while the queen lay dying and the king wept at her bedside. It took 30 seconds. He was so small, so red and screaming. The perfect vessel." Vane's smile widened. "Do you know how much an alpha heir's essence is worth? How much power flows through royal blood? The Shadow Pack pays handsomely for such a resource. And in return, when Iron Ridge falls, and it will fall, I'll be rewarded with lands, titles, an army of my own." Clara's blood turned to ice. "You're killing him. You're killing a child for gold." "I'm securing my future," Vane corrected. "The pup was always going to die." "Weak bloodline," everyone said. "Tragic, but inevitable. The king will grieve, remarry that simpering Lady Seraphine, produce a new heir, one without a brand, and life will continue. Clean, simple, profitable. I'll tell him." Clara's voice shook but held. "I'll tell the king everything. You'll hang for this." Vane laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. "Will you? And who do you think the king will believe? His most trusted captain, the man who's fought beside him for a decade, who saved his life in the Battle of Crimson Ridge." He leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. "Or you, the daughter of a traitor, a disgraced healer with a history of illegal magic, who's been alone with the prince for less than 2 days, who stands to gain everything by claiming conspiracy." Clara's stomach dropped. He was right. She had no proof except a stained cloth, no credibility, no power. Vane pulled back, his smile returning. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to the tower, continue your duties, and keep your mouth shut. The pup will fade in a few more weeks, and you'll move on to scrubbing floors or whatever other menial task suits your station. If you try to warn the king, I'll have you arrested for poisoning the prince. I'll say I caught you putting something in his water. They'll execute you by nightfall. He straightened his crimson cloak, his expression pleasant once more. Or, if you'd prefer, I could simply kill you right now. An accident. A fall down the tower stairs. These things happen. Clara's hands were shaking, but she met his eyes. And if I run, take Tobias and disappear? Vane's smile turned into something monstrous. Then I'll hunt you both down personally, and I'll make sure the pup dies screaming while you watch. He patted her cheek with mock affection. Choose wisely, little healer. He stepped back into the corridor, adjusting his sword belt, every inch the noble captain. Oh, and Clara? The king will be holding court all day. Budget meetings. Terribly boring. I'll be right outside the hall, watching. Then he was gone, leaving Clara trembling in the shadows, the weight of an impossible choice crushing down on her shoulders. Tell the king and die. Stay silent and watch Tobias die. Or run, and be hunted like an animal through the wilderness. Clara looked down at her bandaged wrist, at the blood seeping through from where Tobias had bitten her in fear and pain. She thought of those golden eyes, that tiny body fighting so hard just to breathe. She couldn't let him die, which meant there was only one choice left. She had to run. The announcement came at dusk, delivered by Madame Thorne herself. Her face was grim as she unlocked the nursery door, a sealed letter bearing the king's crimson wax in her hand. The prince is to be transferred to the sanctuary of Last Hope at dawn, she said, her voice flat, emotionless. Pack nothing. He'll be provided for there. Clara's blood turned to ice. She knew that place. Everyone did. The sanctuary of Last Hope was where the dying went to fade in peace, away from the eyes of the living. It was a stone building high in the mountains, staffed by silent monks who specialized in easing suffering. It was where they sent wolves to die. No, the word escaped Clara's lips before she could stop it. Madame Thorne's eyes narrowed. This is the king's decree. Prince Tobias will receive proper care. He'll receive a death sentence. Clara stepped between the housekeeper and Tobias's nest. That place is for the dying. He's not dying. He's being murdered. Enough. Madame Thorne's voice cracked like a whip. You overstep, Miss Whitfield. The king has decided. Guards will arrive at first light to collect the prince. You are dismissed from this post effective immediately. She turned and left, the door locking with brutal finality. Clara stood frozen, her mind racing. Dawn was 8 hours away, 8 hours before Vane's guards took Tobias to that mountain prison, before the brand finished its work in silence and shadow, before a child died and a traitor's secret died with him. She looked at Tobias, curled in his nest, those golden eyes watching her with something that looked like understanding, like he knew what was coming. Clara made her choice in the space of a heartbeat. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall. Within an hour, it was a blizzard wind howling through the castle like a living thing, snow piling against the windows in drifts. The guards would be huddled by fires, the nobles locked in their warm chambers. The castle would be blind. Perfect. Clara wrapped Tobias in every blanket she could find, bundling him against her chest like a newborn. He whimpered but didn't fight. Too weak, too trusting. She pulled on her thickest cloak, threadbare and patched, but it would have to do, and stuffed dried meat and a water skin into a satchel. The tower window faced north, away from the courtyard. Clara had noticed it days ago, noticed the old iron drainage pipe that ran down the exterior wall. Installed centuries ago and long forgotten. She'd thought it was an escape route if Vane ever came to silence her. She never imagined she'd use it to steal the crown prince. Clara pried open the frozen window, and the blizzard roared in like a beast. Snow stung her face, wind tore at her cloak. Below, the ground was invisible, lost in swirling white. It was a 20-foot drop to the drainage pipe. If she missed, they'd both die. She looked at Tobias, pressed against her chest, his heart beating rapidly against hers. "Hold on, little one," she whispered. "We're going to fly." Clara climbed onto the window ledge, the stone slick with ice beneath her boots. The wind tried to rip her backward. She couldn't see the pipe through the snow. She'd have to jump blind and pray. Behind her, in the corridor beyond the locked door, she heard boots, voices. Vane's voice, smooth and commanding. "Check the nursery. Make sure the maid hasn't done anything foolish." No time. Clara jumped. For one terrifying moment. There was nothing but wind, and falling, and Tobias's frightened yelp. Then her hands found frozen metal, and she grabbed with everything she had. The impact jolted through her shoulders, nearly tearing her grip loose, but she held on. Tobias squirmed and whimpered against her chest, and Clara tucked him tighter, whispering frantic reassurances as she climbed down the pipe, one agonizing handhold at a time. The blizzard swallowed them whole. Clara couldn't see 3 feet ahead. Her hands were numb, her face burning with cold. When her boots finally hit snow-covered ground, she nearly collapsed. But she couldn't stop. Not here. Not this close to the castle. She ran into the white darkness, carrying Iron Ridge's air into the frozen wilderness, with nothing but a healer's instinct and a traitor's army about to give chase. Behind her, a bell began to toll. The alarm. They'd discovered the empty nursery. The hunt had begun. Clara pulled her cloak tighter around Tobias and disappeared into the storm, running toward the one place she knew Vane wouldn't follow immediately, the exiled lands, where her father's people had fled 3 years ago, where forbidden magic still lived, where, if she was lucky, someone might still remember the name Whitfield. And if she wasn't lucky, at least Tobias would die free. Not in a cage. That would have to be enough. Clara's lungs burned with frozen air as she stumbled through the blizzard, Tobias's weight growing heavier with each step. The pup had stopped whimpering an hour ago. That terrified her more than the cold, more than the darkness, more than the certainty that Vane's hunters were coming. She found the cave by pure luck, or perhaps her father's spirit, guiding her a narrow opening between 2 ancient pines, hidden by snowdrifts and shadow. Clara crawled inside, her hands so numb she couldn't feel the stone scraping her palms. The cave was small, barely large enough for 2, but it was dry and blocked the wind. It would have to be enough. She laid Tobias on the ground and struck her flint with trembling fingers. 3 tries. 4. Finally, a spark caught the dried moss she'd tucked in her satchel, and weak firelight bloomed against the cave walls. What Clara saw in that light made her heart stop. Tobias was dying, not slowly anymore. Now, his breathing was shallow, rattling. His eyes were half closed, the gold nearly gone, swallowed by gray. The violet brand on his shoulder blazed so bright it cast shadows, pulsing rapidly, desperately, draining the last of his essence like a parasite gorging itself before its host expired. "No." Clara pulled him into her lap, her voice breaking. "No, no, no. Stay with me, Tobias. Please, stay with me." But he was fading. She could feel it, the life slipping away from him like water through her fingers. The escape had pushed him too far. The brand was finishing what it started. Clara's hands hovered over the glowing mark, and she felt her father's warning echo in her mind. "Never touch a siphon brand with bare magic, Clara. The connection flows both ways. The caster will feel it. They'll know where you are." But Tobias was dying, and Clara was done hiding. She pressed both palms against the brand and let the magic her father died protecting flood through her veins like liquid fire. The High Healer's gift, dormant for 3 years, roared to life. Golden light exploded from her hands. So bright the cave blazed like dawn. And Clara felt Brand's structure, felt the intricate web of dark magic woven into Tobias's flesh, threads of corruption burrowing into bone and blood and soul. She grabbed those threads and pulled. The backlash hit her like a fist. Pain screamed through every nerve as the brand fought back, as the dark magic tried to burrow into her instead. Clara tasted blood, felt her nose begin to bleed, but she didn't let go. She wrapped her light around the brand's roots and tore them free, one agonizing strand at a time. Tobias convulsed, his back arching, a sound somewhere between a howl and a scream tearing from his throat. Clara held him down, held him together, pouring everything she had into burning away the corruption. And somewhere far away, across miles of wilderness, beyond the borders of Iron Ridge, in a fortress built of black stone and ambition, a Shadowpack Alpha screamed. He felt it, felt his carefully constructed siphon shattering. felt the golden essence he'd been drinking for 2 years suddenly cut off, the connection severed like a rope snapping under tension. He clutched his chest, eyes wide with rage and disbelief. Someone was breaking his brand. Someone with high healer magic. He called for his generals, his voice a snarl of fury. "Find them. Find whoever is interfering with my asset. Bring me the healer alive, and kill anyone who stands in your way." In the cave, Clara didn't know armies were mobilizing. Didn't know she'd just painted a target on both their backs that would be visible to 2 kingdoms. She only knew that the brand was dying, the violet light dimming, flickering, finally going dark. Tobias went limp in her arms. For one horrible moment, Clara thought she'd killed him. Then she felt it, a single, strong heartbeat. Then another. His breathing deepened, steadied. The gray fled from his eyes, and gold rushed back in like sunrise. Clara collapsed backward, gasping. Her magic spent, her body shaking. Blood dripped from her nose, her ears. Using that much power should have killed her. But she was alive, and so was Tobias. The pup stirred, lifting his head for the first time in days without pain. He looked at Clara with those brilliant golden eyes, now clear and aware and filled with something that looked like wonder. His mouth opened, and in a voice rough with disuse but unmistakably human, he spoke his first words in 2 years. "You saved me." Clara's breath caught. "You can talk?" The pain stopped. Tobias's small voice trembled with emotion. "It's gone. The fire inside me is gone." He pressed against her, and Clara wrapped her arms around him, both of them shaking. Outside, the blizzard raged. Behind them, Vane's hunters searched. Ahead of them, an enemy army marched. But in that moment, in that small cave lit by dying firelight, Clara held a living, breathing, speaking miracle. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd made the right choice, even if it cost her everything. King Marcus Hale stood in the empty nursery, his hands shaking with a rage so pure it threatened to consume him. The window hung open, snow piling on the floor. His son was gone, stolen by the daughter of a traitor. Captain Vane stood at his shoulder, his voice carefully measured, poisonous. "The Whitfield girl, Your Majesty. I suspected she had ulterior motives. Her father was executed for sedition. She likely planned to ransom the prince, or worse, deliver him to your enemies." Marcus's claws extended, shredding the blankets in his fists. "How long?" 4 hours, perhaps 5. The blizzard will slow them, but if she reaches the exiled lands, then we ride now. Marcus's voice was granite and fury. "Every available guard. I want her found. I want my son to return." He turned to Vane, his eyes blazing gold. "And I want the girl's head." They tracked Clara through the snow at dawn, 50 mounted guards following the king's desperate trail. Marcus rode at the front, his wolf instinct screaming, following a scent only he could detect, his own bloodline, faint but unmistakable. Tobias was alive. That meant he could still be saved from whatever dark purpose the Whitfield witch intended. They found her 3 hours later, stumbling through a narrow canyon, the pup clutched against her chest. She looked like death itself, blood dried beneath her nose, her lips blue with cold, moving on nothing but will. Marcus dismounted, his voice carrying like thunder across the snow. "Put down my son." "Now." Clara turned, and Marcus saw her eyes exhausted, defiant, and utterly unafraid. "No. You kidnapped the crown prince. You will hang for this." "I saved him." Clara's voice cracked but held firm. "I saved him from the person who's been murdering him since birth." "Lies." Vane stepped forward, his hand on his sword. "Your Majesty, she's clearly deranged. Let me retrieve the prince." Marcus started forward, every instinct screaming to tear this girl apart and reclaim his son. But before he could take 3 steps, something impossible happened. Tobias shifted, not into his weak, trembling pup form, into something Marcus hadn't seen in 2 years, a human child. Small, thin, but whole, Tobias stood on shaking legs between Clara and his father, his golden eyes fierce despite his fragility. "Don't hurt her." His voice was hoarse but clear. "Father, please, don't hurt her." Marcus froze. His son was speaking. His son was standing. His son was protecting the kidnapper. "Tobias?" Marcus's voice broke. "Son, Come to me. She's poisoned your mind. She healed me." Tobias's small hands spread wide, blocking Clara. "There was a mark on me, Father. A brand. It was burning me from the inside. She pulled it out. She saved my life while everyone else wanted me to die." "That's absurd." "Your Majesty, the child is confused," Vane interjected smoothly. "Trauma, exposure. Show him." Tobias turned his shoulder, pulling aside his torn shirt. Where the siphon brand had blazed violet, there was now only scarred flesh, the unmistakable pattern of dark magic, burned into his skin. "This is what made me weak. Someone put this on me, and she's the only one who cared enough to see it." Marcus stared at the scar, his world tilting. That pattern. He knew that pattern. He'd seen it in intelligence reports from the War of the Crimson Moon, the Shadow Pack's signature. His son had been branded, for years, and he'd never seen it. Marcus looked at Clara, then at Vane, then back at his son standing on shaking legs in the snow, protecting a maid with his body. "Who placed the brand?" Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. Tobias's eyes shifted to Captain Vane, and everything Marcus thought he knew shattered like ice. Vane's smile finally died. For 3 years he'd worn the mask of loyalty, of honor, of devotion to the crown. But as Marcus's golden eyes fixed on him with dawning understanding, that mask cracked and fell away like shattered porcelain. "Your Majesty," Vane said, his voice still smooth, but his hand tightening on his sword hilt. "The child is mistaken, traumatized. You know I would never. Show me your ring hand." Marcus's command cut through the air like a blade. Vane's left hand always gloved, always hidden, flexed instinctively. "I don't see how that's..." Now, for a heartbeat, everything hung suspended. Then Vane laughed a genuine, ugly sound and stripped off his glove. On his ring finger, burned into the flesh in the same violet that had marked Tobias, was the mirror sigil, the controller's mark, the brand that linked him to the siphon he'd placed on the infant prince. "You want the truth, Marcus?" Vane's voice dripped with venom. "Your son was supposed to die at 6 months, but the stubborn little creature kept fighting, kept breathing, kept clinging to life like the pathetic runt he is. Do you have any idea how much alpha essence I've fed to my allies? How much gold I've been promised for delivering them the strongest bloodline in the north?" Marcus's roar shook snow from the canyon walls. He shifted mid-stride, his massive silver wolf form exploding forward. But Vane was ready. He drew a signal flare from his cloak and fired it skyward, a screaming violet star that burst against the gray clouds. And the mountains answered. From the northern passes, from hidden valleys, from forests that should have been empty, they came. Hundreds of Shadow Pack soldiers poured across Iron Ridge's borders like a black tide, their war howls echoing through the wilderness. They'd been waiting, positioned for months, years. All they'd needed was the signal. Marcus skidded to a halt, his mind reeling. The western border, the northern trade routes, all undefended because Vane had reassured him the Shadow Pack was weak, scattered, no threat, because Marcus had trusted him. "The siphon did more than drain your son," Vane said, backing toward his own horse as chaos erupted around them. "It powered the wards that kept our forces hidden. Every day that brat stayed alive and branded, we grew stronger while you grew blind." He mounted smoothly, his smile returning. "But now the connection's broken, the wards are falling, and we don't need to hide anymore. Iron Ridge falls today, Marcus, and it's your own weakness that killed it. You couldn't even see your son was being used as a battery." He wheeled his horse and galloped toward the advancing army, his crimson cloak billowing like a banner of betrayal. Marcus shifted back to human form, his mind a storm of rage and horror. His son's weakness hadn't been weakness at all. It had been a slow execution designed to fuel an invasion. Every moment Tobias suffered, every scream, every convulsion, had been feeding power to the enemy. And Marcus, in his pride and shame, had been too blind to see it. He turned to where Clara stood with Tobias clutched against her chest, both of them shaking. The girl who'd risked everything. The girl he'd been ready to execute. How long? His voice was raw. How long can he survive without the brand? Clara's eyes blazed with defiance and exhaustion. "He's not surviving without it, Your Majesty. He's finally living. The brand was killing him. Breaking it saved his life. But it also Marcus gestured helplessly at the army pouring through his borders. It triggered this. No. Clara's voice was steel. Vane triggered this. The invasion was always coming. We just stopped them from having a power source. She met his eyes without flinching. Your son fought a war every day of his life. He held them back longer than any soldier could have. He's not weak, Your Majesty. He's the strongest wolf in your kingdom. Marcus looked at Tobias, truly looked at him, standing on trembling legs, scarred but unbroken, golden eyes fierce with the same fire as his mother's. His son, his heir, his future, and Marcus had almost killed him. Forgive me. The words tore from Marcus's throat, and he dropped to his knees in the snow before his child. Tobias, forgive me. I failed you. Tobias's small hand reached out and touched his father's face. Help us stop him. Marcus rose, his eyes hardening to steel. He turned to his guards, his voice carrying across the canyon. Ride for Iron Ridge. Sound the war bells. Every able wolf to the walls. He looked back at Clara and Tobias, his expression fierce. And you two stay behind me. Because if I'm going to save my kingdom, I'm going to need the healer who saved my son. The castle walls shook with the impact of battering rams, as Clara stood in the great hall, Tobias beside her, facing a court that looked at her with equal parts suspicion and desperation. Marcus had called an emergency assembly every noble, every advisor, every guard captain who wasn't already on the walls fighting for their lives. Lady Seraphine, the Luna-elect, stood at the front of the crowd, her beautiful face twisted with contempt. You bring a kidnapper before us while our kingdom burns? Have you lost your mind, Your Majesty? I bring the woman who saved my son's life, Marcus said, his voice carrying across the hall. And the one who can prove Captain Vane has been betraying us for years. A ripple of disbelief moved through the assembly. Clara felt their eyes on her, judging, doubting. She was nothing to them, a maid, a Whitfield, the daughter of a traitor. But she had the truth. Clara stepped forward, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. Captain Vane placed a siphon brand on Prince Tobias the night he was born. He's been draining the prince's alpha essence and feeding it to the Shadow Pack, using it to power concealment wards while positioning their army at our borders. Lies! Seraphine's voice rang out. She's invented this fantasy to save herself from execution. Where is your proof? Clara turned to Tobias. Show them. The young prince pulled aside his shirt, revealing the scarred brand on his shoulder. The pattern was unmistakable. The sovereign mark of the Shadow Pack, burned deep into royal flesh. Gasps echoed through the hall. The controller wears the mirror mark, Clara continued. A ring brand on their left hand that links them to the victim. Captain Vane wore it. I saw it myself. Vane isn't here to defend himself, Seraphine pressed, but her voice wavered. This proves nothing. Outside, a horn blast cut through the air. The Shadow Pack had breached the outer courtyard. They were running out of time. Clara's hands began to glow with golden light, and the court recoiled. Forbidden magic, high healer power, the very thing that had gotten her family exiled. The brand isn't fully broken, Clara said, her voice rising. There's still a thread connecting Tobias to whoever controlled the siphon. I can trace it. I can show you where it leads. But severing a controller's brand completely requires a blood sacrifice. The healer must anchor the victim's essence with their own life force. Marcus's face went white. You're saying you have to die to save him? I'm saying I have to give something precious. Clara met his eyes. My magic. All of it. Once I sever this link, I'll never heal again. The gift dies with the spell. No. Tobias grabbed her hand, his young voice desperate. You can't. There has to be another way. There isn't. Clara knelt before him, cupping his face. But you're worth it. You've always been worth it. Before anyone could stop her, Clara placed both hands on Tobias's scarred shoulder and released every shred of power she possessed. Golden light exploded through the great hall like a star-going supernova. So bright nobles shielded their eyes. Clara felt her magic pour out of her, felt it wrap around Tobias like armor, felt it follow the invisible thread that still connected him to his tormentor. The thread led across the courtyard, through the battle, straight to the enemy commander directing the assault. And when the light reached him, his left hand hidden beneath a stolen Iron Ridge uniform began to glow violet. The nobles followed Clara's light to the windows, looked down at the battlefield, and saw the truth illuminated in purple fire. The enemy commander ripped off his helm. It was Vane. But standing beside him, her hand on his shoulder, wearing the crimson robes of a Shadowpact high priestess, was Lady Seraphine, the Luna-elect, the woman Marcus had been preparing to marry. She'd been part of it all along, the inside agent, feeding information, ensuring the king remained blind while his son suffered. Seraphine's scream of rage echoed even through the stone walls as Clara's magic burned away the concealment spell she'd been maintaining for years. Clara collapsed, her magic spent, her gift extinguished. But as Marcus caught her, as Tobias clung to her, as guards rushed to arrest the infiltrators in their midst, she smiled. The thread was severed. Tobias was free. And the truth, at last, had been dragged into the light, even if it cost her everything. The Shadowpact army collapsed without Vane's coordination and Seraphine's intelligence. Leaderless, their concealment wards shattered. They retreated across the borders by nightfall, leaving Iron Ridge bloodied but standing. Marcus executed the traitors himself at dawn, swift, merciless justice for those who'd tortured his son. But victory tasted like ash. Clara woke 3 days later in the royal healing wing, her magic gone, her body hollow where power used to live. Tobias sat beside her bed, refusing to leave. When her eyes opened, he took her hand with a fierce grip. "You're staying," he said, his young voice brooking no argument. "Father's making you high healer advisor. You don't need magic to teach me how to be strong the right way." Marcus entered, looking older, humbled. "My son taught me something in that canyon. True strength isn't dominating others, it's protecting those who cannot protect themselves. You showed him that." "Show me." He knelt beside her bed. "Iron Ridge needs a new kind of kingdom. One built on mercy, not just power. Will you help us build it?" Clara looked at Tobias, no longer the trembling pup, but a prince with fire in his eyes and compassion in his heart. She looked at Marcus, a king finally learning to see. "Yes," she whispered. Tobias's first decree as crown prince was abolishing the exile laws. The Whitfield name was restored. Clara's family returned home. And when Tobias came of age, with Clara as his chief advisor, he ruled not with an iron fist, but with the strength of mercy, the greatest power the kingdom had ever known. The weak prince had become the wisest king, and it all began with a maid who refused to look away from suffering. In the frozen north, where wolves run beneath ancient stars, they still tell this story. They call it the brand of the Silver Prince. But those who remember know the truth. It was never about the prince at all. It was about the girl who saw a child where everyone else saw weakness. And in seeing him truly, she changed a kingdom forever. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.